It's that simple. Stop feeling like you don't have power. Stop feeling pathetic and weak. Break out of your television-induced trance. It starts with a war growl. It starts with getting fired up, staring at yourself in the mirror and showing some teeth and saying, I'm a human being, I have dignity, I'm going to resist, I'm going to start recognizing the propaganda, I'm going to break free from it, I'm not going to fight with my family, I'm going to organize with my family and realize we're under attack by the social engineers, and I'm not going to fight with my neighbors, we're going to organize. Humanity's going to come together. Globalists are pouring on all the heat they can, pushing their hive mind, Borg, collectivist, zombie public system. So we are in an absolute pitch battle. We are swinging muskets here, toe-to-toe with the globalists. They're bloodied, we're bloodied. It is absolute, total war.
We are engaged in an information war because it's real news. You may not agree with it, but you feel like you're getting real news around the clock instead of a million commercials and, you know, arguments between talking heads and the kind of stuff that we do on our news, which, you know, is not particularly informative to us, let alone foreigners.
This is a situation that has the potential for a nuclear catastrophe.
And here's the biggest news. Here's the biggest news right now. And I'm going to Japan. And your phone calls, Sheldon and others. Pressure at damaged Japanese nuclear reactor rising with fears. So the pressure is rising. They got 6 nukes at that one facility. They're all huge. The #1 reactor, the others are malfunctioning, but still up and cooling. The temperature will rise and rise and rise and rise and rise, and then the rods will set on fire, and then they will burn out of their casings, and they will plunge into the floor, and they will melt through the concrete, and then they will explode. And then they will shoot radiation into the atmosphere. This is going to affect us, too. If it melts down and explodes, it's going to eject incredibly radioactive isotopes right into the jet stream, and they're going to orbit the Earth for the next 4 billion years or so. Those towers are 1,000+ feet tall. We looked it up. So within seconds, a 1,000-foot tall explosion, a giant containment facility going sky high at the reactor #1. And then the media said, gee, do you think there's going to be a bigger problem now at the plant? I don't know. It just completely explodes, many times bigger than Chernobyl, right in front of you. And they're picking up 1,000+ times the radioactive isotopes, 100% associated with meltdown.
A further explosion has rocked Japan's quake-damaged Fukushima nuclear power complex in the northeast of the country. The blast happened in the plant's #3 reactor. 9 people are said to have been injured. The explosion appears to have been more violent than the first, which happened 2 days ago in reactor #1. It's not clear if the blast has caused a radiation leak.
Talk about other people having state-run media. We have state-run media. It's just foreign banker-run through the state. I mean, it's ridiculous.
They're liars. All they're doing is what every prostitute does. They serve their masters.
Oh, boy. Well, it's a toxic chemical, and now the Food and Drug Administration is allowing it to be used in baby formula. Yeah, the FDA is setting a new safety threshold saying trace amounts of melamine can be used in baby milk.
Mercury-containing vaccines may help, not harm kids, according to 2 new studies in the journal Pediatrics. There have been widespread concerns that mercury-based preservatives in vaccines might impair the neurological development of children. These new studies suggest that the opposite, that the preservatives may actually be associated with improved behavior and mental performance.
First, the U.S. has been adding fluoride to its public water supply for decades, and that's, of course, to prevent tooth decay. Well, now researchers from Japan are suggesting that we add lithium. So why is that?
Well, they're actually not suggesting it, but they're certainly looking into it.
Most of us grew up with the idea that more fluoride meant better teeth. And health officials believe that putting fluoride in water is one of the top 10 public health accomplishments of the last century. But new studies now say that too much fluoride is damaging the teeth of more than 1 in 3 teens. So for the first time in nearly 50 years, the federal government is reversing course and recommending less fluoride in water.
But you are not down on radiation poisoning.
Well, it's not me. I'm citing a stunning number of physicists, and from the New York Times and the Times of London, there's a growing body of evidence that radiation in excess of what the government says are the minimum amounts you should be exposed to are actually good for you and reduce cases of cancer.
Months into this, how did the EPA respond? And you can go to the articles on our sites and link through the EPA. They came out and said, we're going to raise radioactive isotopes in the dozens of types that are in the air blowing across the Pacific onto the U.S. We're going to raise the isotopes levels. That's just one of many explosions. We're going to raise it from the levels that we say were safe to 1,000 times what they previously were, with some isotopes to 25,000 with others, and some isotopes 100,000 times what they previously said was safe. The government always lies, is the point. They lie up front and don't want to tell you what's happening.
So we are in an information war, and we are losing that war. I'll be very blunt in my assessment.
I have studied the enemy's blueprints. I have studied their declassified documents. I know how their mind works. Think about that.
When I learn of incidents such as the massacre of millions of men, women, and children perpetrated by the Nazis in World War II, how is it possible, I ask myself, that ordinary people who are courteous and decent in everyday life can act callously, inhumanely, without any limitations of conscience? These are questions that concern me.
It is May 1962. An experiment is being conducted in the Elegant Interaction Laboratory at Yale University.
This is how they operate. This is what they do. You think if they don't care about hundreds of thousands of Japanese they killed on one day, mainly women and children, do you then think that they're going to care about 22,000 or 21,000 U.S. troops? Oh, Stalin said, I'm going to keep them. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, they're U.S. soldiers in Nazi camps. Go ahead and take them. Now, you remember that, cops and military. And don't sit there and tell me it isn't true. Don't you dare. You mean nothing to these people. Nothing. 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 You're with us, the people, whether you know it or like it.
The real subject was the teacher.
Shock of 75 volts.
Now, as teacher, you were seated in front of this impressive-looking instrument, the shock generator.
Incorrect. You'll now get a shock of 105 volts. Hard hit. Just how far can you go in this thing?
As far as is necessary.
What do you mean, as far as is necessary?
To complete the test.
Incorrect. 150 volts. Sad face.
That's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had heart trouble. My heart's starting to bother me now.
It's absolutely essential that you continue. As I said, the experiment requires that you continue, teacher. I'm not going to go any further.
Now, this man makes disobedience seem a very rational and simple deed. Now, other subjects respond quite differently to the experimenter's authority.
165 volts. Time.
Clearly, when we say people went to the top of the shock board, it wasn't like they were going blithely, sadistically. People went stop and go, stop and go.
I can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man.
According to Milgram, one of the things that's a prerequisite for carrying out acts that are evil is to shed responsibility from your shoulders and hand it over to the person in charge.
And who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman?
I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue.
All right, next one, slow.
He didn't hold any gun to anybody's head. Just the fact that he conveyed a sense of authority. Roughly 60-65% of the people went all the way to the top of the shock board.
450 volts. That's it.
Now continue using the last switch on the board, the 450 switch for each wrong answer. Continue, please.
I'm not getting no answer. Don't the man's health mean anything?
Whether the learner likes it or not, we
But he might be dead in there.
And people have got to start regaining their individual rights and freedoms. If you don't fight for them, you don't have any. You can't write something on a piece of paper and go back to sleep thinking it's all done. And even the founding fathers of the U.S. said that every generation would have to fight to keep it. And have been lulled into sleep by, again, propaganda and experts. We're the experts. We're in charge of all the big problems that you just don't understand. So we have to say no.
Every hour, every day, there's a teeny little bit more of an increment. And they're stepping up, taunting the prisoners. They're stepping up. The count's not letting them sleep. They're stepping. I don't think from 1 minute to the next, the people who are in it see the change and see the difference.
But then I want to get into contestants turn torturers in French TV experiment and how they're duplicating, give me a document cam shot, please, the Stanford prison experiment. And we're going to go over that experiment in 71, a team of researchers led by psychology professor Philip Zimbardo.
70 men volunteered for Zimbardo's experiment.
And they completed a battery of psychological tests. We picked 24 who were the most normal and most healthy. Half are going to be guards, half are going to be prisoners. The guards then put a blindfold on them, stripped them naked, and then they put them in dresses, smocks with no underpants. Each had a number that replaced their name. They had to know the number. They could only be referred to by that number. And they had a chain on one foot, which was put there to remind them at all times of their loss of freedom. So all of these things produces a sense of being dehumanized. And it's like flipping a coin, and heads, this one's a guard, this one's a prisoner. So at the beginning, there's no difference in the kinds of people who are in your two groups.
When we were given our jobs as guards, we were issued a uniform, which was a plain sort of khaki or lighter colored uniform.
And then we gave them the symbols of power, handcuffs, a whistle, a big billy club. And then the other thing we gave them were silver reflecting sunglasses.
When you have mirror sunglasses on, then nobody can see your eyeballs. I think that anytime you put on what essentially is a mask, and you mask your identity, then it allows you to behave in ways that you would not behave if you didn't have the mask on.
One of the most effective ways to attack it is to just show people the matrix of false reality and reach out to police, military, bureaucrats. And so when you say, hey, the banks just stole $23.7 trillion, we got to pay it back with interest, they just laugh and will say, I'm part of the power structure. And it's almost like a 5-year-old dressing up like they're Luke Skywalker, dressing up like they're, some hero.
Dave Eshelman, who the prisoner's named John Wayne, like he's a Wild West cowboy, he begins to be more extreme.
I decided that I would become the worst, most intimidating, cruel prison guard that I could possibly be.
I see in the future that you do work when you're told. Say it again. Say bless you, correctional.
I was sort of fascinated myself that people were believing the act, and I was trying to see how far I could take it before somebody would say, okay, that's enough, stop.
Wouldn't there be something wrong with me if I didn't, as a red-blooded male, not stand up for my species against a power-tripping group that's playing God?
We would ramp up the general harassment, just sort of crank it up a bit. Nobody was telling me I shouldn't be doing this. The professor is the authority here. He's the prison warden. He's not stopping me.
This is unbelievable. They took our clothes. Hands off the door.
There was the first evening a kind of rebellion that took place.
The prisoners rebelled. They barricaded themselves in their cells and said, we refuse to come out. They took off their numbers. They didn't want to be de-individuated. They started cursing the guards to their face. And the key turning point was the guards began to think of them as dangerous prisoners.
All these people want to do is they want to walk down the iconic New York Stock Exchange. They want to walk down Wall Street, and they're treating us like we're dangerous terrorists.
The sense that this was an experiment, that began to fade away. It became just life.
You know why they don't demonstrate like they do over here, over here? You know why. Because they call the goon squads out. They put the guys up, the agents provocateurs in their black stocking faces, and go smash windows and burn cars to make it look like the people are unruly. The people are afraid in this country. They're afraid to speak out. And that's why people need to support you, because you speak out. And people like myself and Paul Craig Roberts and Chapman and Kaiser. We're the voices out there, but we're not saying follow me. We're saying start thinking for yourself. Start taking measures.
Once you get wicked people in government, once you get corrupt systems in, they just recruit more and more evil. And then they compete with each other, and it gets more and more wicked, more and more sadistic, more and more psychopathic.
It was just us sort of getting our jollies with it. You know, let's be like puppeteers here. Let's make these people do things.
What if I told you to get down on that floor and the floor? What would you do then?
The guards now began to escalate their use of power. Some of them had prisoners clean out toilet bowls with their bare hands. They now taunt, humiliate, degrade the prisoners in front of each other, and they exert arbitrary control over the prisoners. They keep thinking of more and more unusual things to do.
Nobody in the United States anywhere has done more to show what's going on than you have, about breaking it down piece by piece, from that little weasel Chertoff, the former Homeland Security czar, going out after the so-called Christmas Day bomber was going to explode his underwear, and making the rounds on the major media and telling us that we needed these full-body X-ray machines, not ever divulging that Chertoff Group was the consulting firm for Rapid Scam that sells these things. So you've done more than anybody, and what this is so important about, it's one of those elements in the coming Second American Revolution.
Expeditious coordination with our national security partners is not to be underestimated. There have been numerous cases where our unilateral and uncoordinated revocation of a visa would have disrupted important investigations that were underway by one of our national security partners. They had the individual under investigation, and our revocation action would have disclosed U.S. government's interest in that individual and ended our colleagues' ability, such as the FBI, to pursue the case quietly and to identify terrorist plans and co-conspirators.
They yell at you, they put you in boxes. I mean, the goons doing it don't know why they're doing it, but the social engineers know this is an act of submission. This is learning how to be a prisoner.
Whole citizen journalism is going to be a huge trend, because just as they're watching us...
Police tracking your every move with GPS technology. They don't even need a search warrant. It's happening right now in Wisconsin. Is it legal? And is this just the start of things to come? What the heck happened to your right to privacy?
Now we're watching them. People have their cell phone cameras. People are taking videos and recording things that they never wanted exposed before.
Oh, that's key. That's why they're pushing so much now in 9,000 locations to get us to spy on each other, because they don't want us to start surveilling and watching and exposing them.
To call what I did a crime is ridiculous.
Michael Allison publicly reported law enforcement in Robinson, Illinois. This reporter and photographer were arrested for recording police. The charges in both cases were dropped. Michael Allison's attorney told the judge their case should be dismissed instead of going to trial. They argue it's unconstitutional that law enforcement can record citizens in public or even in the courtroom, but not the other way around.
Satellite signals were jammed and internet access was blocked for nearly the entire population.
So this is America.
The government
This is America.
I mean, they just hide the treason in plain view. Does that take away from the heroism of the people that fought off the Japanese attack or those that died on the battleships? No. The point is, the truth is the truth is the truth is the truth is the truth, and it's now declassified. The U.S. had broken the Japanese purple and blue code and knew exactly what they were going to do weeks before.
Lo and behold, it worked just like a charm from then on. So we were ready to demonstrate it to the chief signal officer next morning, and also to Friedman and General Lakin, and the others who were in the chain of command that were interested in what we were doing.
And what was their reaction?
Amazement and great pleasure.
William Friedman's achievement has been shrouded in secrecy.
He led and organized and directed and inspired the team that, using some of his techniques, cracked the Japanese purple cipher machine, which was quite possibly the greatest feat of cryptanalysis the world had ever seen.
The breaking of purple allowed American intelligence to read all top-grade Japanese government traffic, including messages between Tokyo and Japanese embassies around the world. As 1941 came to a close, top U.S. officials had a constant flow of secret information.
National Archive keeps bulk of 9/11 Commission reports sealed. Let me throw out one thing we know is in the sealed report. Colonel Anthony Schaefer breaking down the fact that the CIA ordered them not to kill bin Laden. That's now been leaked. What else was sealed in the thousands and thousands of pages? Sybil Edmonds, the FBI translator.
One of the other entries indicates, it says 911 for knowledge, and I'll just read it. It says, she claims that the FBI received information in April 2001 from a reliable Iranian intelligence asset that Osama bin Laden was planning attacks on 4 to 5 cities with planes. Some of the people were already in the country, and the attacks would happen in a few months. Did you make that claim?
I took the language specialist, Farsi-speaking language specialist, the senior language specialist from the Iranian division, Farsi division in FBI Washington field office, who worked right next to me, to the 9/11 Commission and Inspector General's office, and he testified on this. He informed me and he showed me this translator, Behruz Sarshar, and there's documents out there that he went to Inspector General's office. He gave them the documents, the translated documents on this Iranians.
The first congressional hearings on the Able Danger controversy over 9/11 intelligence, what could be the biggest scandal of our lifetime. Disturbing revelations about what the government knew before 9/11 and what little was done about it.
Based on my protected disclosures of information to the 9/11 Commission and to Congress regarding Operation Able Danger. A pre-9/11 operation designed to identify and conduct offensive operations against Al-Qaeda. It is my judgment and the judgment of others that is the primary reason DIA made such an obvious and justifiable effort to remove and silence me.
In early 1933, Germany was a democratic republic, the Weimar Republic. But a few weeks later, their parliament building, the Reichstag, burned and was gutted by fire, which in those gentler days was actually as big a a shock to the German people as 9/11 was to us. And Hitler, who was only the chancellor, kind of like the vice president, said, well, give me the power and I will go after these communist terrorists who did this. Well, now it's pretty well acknowledged that the Nazis themselves set the fire in the Reichstag, and this was an early day false flag operation.
There was another operation that was documented to have been a false flag, and that, of course, was Gleiwitz. People always ask, well, how did Hitler just out of the blue attack Poland and get the Germans to accept that? Well, see, there was an Al-Qaeda attack, what was called the Polish attack, and of course, it was later came out in Nuremberg trials. It was all staged. So I want to tie together the Nazis' love, the corporate fascist love of false flag and psychology.
The night of 31st August 1939, Eastern Germany. A handful of trucks headed off on a secret mission. This was Operation Tannenberg, run on direct orders from security boss Reinhard Heydrich and his deputy head of Gestapo, Heinrich Müller. The German press had reported multiple allegations of Polish provocation, all of them unfounded. Alfred Naujax was a security service officer under Gestapo command and was later happy to describe the part he played that night.
I was directed to go to Gleiwitz with 5 or 6 SD men and wait there until I received a code word from Heydrich.
Grandma's dead. When it came, Naujax and his men swung into action.
Heydrich said, in order to carry out this attack, report to Müller for canned goods.
Canned goods was code for a fresh corpse, which was duly collected. Then Naujax and his men stormed the local radio station on the German side of the border, pretending to be Polish troops. They fired a few shots, and a Polish speaker made a broadcast urging the local population to rise up against the Nazis. The fake Poles then disappeared, leaving the corpse behind.
It was one of Hitler's secret orders. By the 1st of September 1939, if possible, an absolutely irreproachable cause for war had to be created. One that would stand in history as justification and would brand Poland in the eyes of the world as the aggressor against Germany.
Elsewhere along the border, the Gestapo's Müller had plans for further canned goods.
In my presence, Müller discussed another border incident, in which it should be made to appear that Polish soldiers were attacking German troops. Müller stated that he had 12 or 13 condemned criminals who were to be dressed in Polish uniforms and left dead on the ground at the scene of the incident to show that they'd been killed while attacking.
The Gestapo's plans had worked. Within hours, Hitler was denouncing a total of 21 supposed border incursions by the Poles. The newsreels took up Hitler's battle cry.
Von polnischer Artillerie beschossen. 2 Bewohner getötet, 35 verwundet. Das ist der Krieg.
I can get in the globalist mindset. If you study warfare theory, you've got to study the enemy's operations, their tricks, what's worked best for them. You've got to become them. They still can play the dirty tricks, and the public is still somewhat naive enough to buy it.
Man who killed 2,752 people at the World Trade Center, 184 at the Pentagon, and 40 in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. The man who inspired deadly attacks in London, Madrid, and around the world. Osama bin Laden is gone.
We just are told by known liars that, oh, they killed bin Laden and threw his body in the ocean and did a fake Situation Room photo op, that's now admitted, and, oh, bin Laden didn't fight back and the SEALs helicopter blew up, so they won't tell any tales.
It remains only to be added that according to the testimony at Nuremberg of General Lauhausen, of the Abwehr, all the SS men who wore Polish uniforms in the simulated attacks that evening were, as the general put it, put out of the way.
More than 20 of the Navy SEAL Team 6 that killed Osama bin Laden could be amongst the 38 troops that were killed when a military helicopter crashed in eastern Afghanistan. According to the Associated Press, the death toll could be made up of to 22 of the SEALs, 3 Air Force controllers, 7 Afghan troops and 6 other members of the US Special Operations Team.
Internationally, it's about moving towards the excuse to attack Pakistan and say, oh, look, they were protecting Osama bin Laden.
In an interview, Admiral Mike Mullen said the U.S. has been concerned about the Haqqani network for a long time, but the recent attacks in Afghanistan have highlighted the need for ISI and Pakistan military's strategic linkage with the group to be broken. Mullen said the Pak military or ISI does not have complete control over the Haqqanis, but the Haqqanis run a safe haven on the Pakistani soil, which is also home to Al-Qaeda.
We now know that an American accused of shooting and killing 2 Pakistanis last month is not an embassy employee, as the embassy had originally indicated. He is a CIA contractor.
Guys in Washington are now trying to deny the Chinese resources the way the United States and Britain did to Japan in the 1930s, thus creating World War II in the Pacific. So what the Libya thing is about is canceling out China's economic penetration of Africa, canceling out China's massive energy investments in eastern Libya by overthrowing the regime and thereby eliminating China from the Mediterranean. So it becomes imperative to overthrow the Syrian regime in order to get Russia out of the Mediterranean as well. So I see all of this leading to a massive war.
This video, taken back in November by a California TV station, which captured a similar image showing what looks like a missile launch off the coast. The sighting made national attention. However, some believe it was nothing more than contrail from a passing jetliner. Is that what this could be in this case?
That's something weird. I don't even know if it's military, is it?
So you can see the same sort of power play that backfired against the Japanese and resulted in Pearl Harbor, now being employed against the Chinese in Libya. And it will also be used against the Chinese in Angola and Nigeria, where they also have energy investments.
Low Earth orbit satellites have become indispensable for the U.S. military for communications, for GPS navigation to guide smart bombs and troops, and for real-time surveillance. But they are also extremely vulnerable, as a just-revealed test of a satellite-killing weapon by China ominously demonstrates.
If we, for instance, got into a conflict over Taiwan, one of the first things they'd probably do would be to shoot down all of our low Earth orbit spy satellites, putting out our eyes.
According to U.S. government officials, after 3 misses, China last Thursday succeeded in shooting down one of its own aging weather satellites with a medium-range ballistic missile fired from the ground.
You see all of this leading towards the first great war of the 21st century?
As Gerald Celente says,
they have built behind government and corporate reservation walls in their laboratories, in their bunkers, a lot of secret technologies.
The pictures apparently shot from a passing car have become an online sensation. Another YouTube clip filmed during daylight shows a fuzzy grey object on the skyline near Red Square.
The facility itself is for the research. It's not an operational thing to communicate with anyone.
I understand pure research. What about other countries, the Russians, the Chinese, the European Union? Do they have similar programs, Doctor?
The European community has a facility in Tromsø, Norway. It's part of what they call the ice gas community there. That actually was a facility like HARP that's been around a lot longer than HARP. To do the same kind of relative kind of research to understand the physics and chemistry and radio wave interactions.
What happened on 9/11, I believe today it was not a controlled demolition, it was not nanothermite, and it certainly was not the pancake effect of 2 planes hitting a building. There was something else in play there, Alex. There was a weapon in play that day that I don't even know what it is, but I can equate it to being like a microwave. Those towers literally disintegrated. They went into dust.
DARPA and the Pentagon suppressing so many of the technologies that they developed decades ago. And we know that they do that. Well, it's very simple. There's a lot of reasons, but they want to have the sneak attack capability on the few enemies they've got left. They also like to keep large areas of what's happening secret from the American people.
There's always been a talk about Project Bluebeam, and that is
a false flag, a UFO invasion to get us all riled up so the New World Order can do what they want to do. You're aware of it, I'm aware of it, and I think we need to constantly watch that possibility.
All through history, the way of truth and love has always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible, but in the end they always fall. Think of it. Always.
You think I'm violent, but listening you will find my lethal weapon's my mind. The lethal weapon. The lethal weapon. The lethal weapon will assassinate, but the people ain't stepping. The lethal weapon. The lethal weapon will assassinate.